How's everyone tonight? My name is Sheri Smith. Some of you might recognize me because I have been a nurse in this community for many years. Specifically, a labor and delivery nurse. So basically what that means is I've seen almost every vagina in McLean County. Hey, you look familiar. Aren't you patient 54617? You look fabulous. How's your baby? So I've been a nurse a long time. As a matter of fact, some of you might not know this, but Florence Nightingale and I were in the same graduating class. She was a much better student than I was. During clinicals, she went the extra mile serving all the military men. You know what I mean? Let's just say I caught her sneaking into our dorms late at night, looking pretty tired, with someone else's fatigues on. All joking aside, I've had the best career in nursing. Nursing has been very good to me. Never in my wildest dreams did I even think I would be a nurse, but I love it. I remember vividly my first shift, my first clinical, my first job, making what I thought was tons of money, $7 an hour. I went to the unit all dressed up. I had a nice little white dress on, little Bobbie socks, cute shoes. And I thought, oh my God, this is my first shift. So I get there and I approach the desk and I say, can you tell me where my preceptor is? The nurse kind of grumbled at me and they're like, oh, she's in 346. So I proceeded to 346, really excited about my first clinical experience. What they neglected to tell me is the patient was on a bowel prep and couldn't make it to the bathroom. So I bang open the door and I close it immediately and run to the bathroom and puked all over the bathroom stall. So instead of having my first clinical experience, I had to clean the stall for 8 hours. Afterward, I said to this older nurse, this woman in charge, I said, I won't be a nurse longer than 6 months, don't worry. And she goes, well, you better think about that. So here I am, 35 years later, still learning and practicing. Okay, so all of you know, nurses have the best stories, right? Best stories. Yes, I have seen things stuck inside people, stuck on people, ingested. I have walked in on people in the shower together. I even saw I saw a couple having a conjugal visit on the tile floor. And one of my famous stories is I delivered a baby in a birthing tub. After the woman pushed, ladies, you know what I'm talking about, some stuff comes out, and the husband was in the pool with the wife and they're both naked. Luckily, I haven't had a lot of stories about being sick or being a patient, that is. But the word in the nursing community is, we are bitches. It's a fact, we are the worst patients. And even worse when it comes to our families. So in December of 2020, my father calls me, and he says, just like he was telling me what he had for lunch, he says to me, I'm gonna have open heart surgery next week. I'm like, what? I start laughing at him. I'm like, that's impossible. There's a pandemic going on. He said, the doctor told him he needed it immediately. So the following day, little did my father know, I called the doctor. After we spoke for a few minutes, he says to me, "Where did you go to high school?" I'm like, what the hell? We're talking about my father. So I remembered he lived 2 blocks away after he told me, like, the geography. And I couldn't believe that this guy remembered me. So obviously, he must have had mad love for me. You know, I still got it. So after having more of a conversation, he explained that my dad really needed the procedure. So I go, and in turn, I go try to tell my father, like, explain in layman's terms, they are going to cut your chest open. Like, this is the real McCoy. And my father says to me, "Why didn't you marry him? He makes a lot of money." I'm like, what the hell? My father trying to play matchmaker, but not even thinking about his open heart surgery. So the surgery went great. He did fine. However, they put him in a rehab, and he started to feel sick. But guess what? They sent him home anyway. So he was released on a Sunday, and by the way, he lives in Chicago in Morton Grove. And the following Thursday, he gets a call from the Illinois Department of Public Health telling him he has COVID. So 2 days after that, he was having difficulty breathing, and we immediately sent him by ambulance to the hospital. Okay, so 2 days later, I'm up north by myself thinking, woohoo! And I started to have symptoms. So what do? I call everyone in Bloomington normal, and I say to them, what should I do? I was getting sicker and sicker, and I knew I had no choice. And the last thing any nurse wants to do is go to the ER and wait 5 hours. So I knew I couldn't drive. So again, I'm calling the Morton Grove Fire Department to come and get me. So the ambulance arrived immediately. And I was trying to grab things to bring to the hospital. Like, I haven't been in the hospital since 17 years ago when I had a baby. So the guy says to me, "Ma'am, just get on the cart. I'll wrap you in a warm blanket." I looked up at him, and I looked at his big blue eyes. He was so darling. So I forgot my name. Seriously, I was so delirious that I left my phone on the counter. So I get to the hospital, and I'm feeling like a wet noodle. Like, I'm sore. I couldn't walk. I felt awful. So the doctor says, we're going to have to admit you because you have MS. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. I have this horrific condition who likes to rear its ugly head when something bad's going on. All I'm going to say tonight about this dreadful disease is that I have MS, but it doesn't have me. So my dad and I were 2 rooms away from each other. And of course, the staff won't let me go see him. And the nurse says to me, "Because he has COVID." I'm like, "Dummy, he gave it to me." So a few days later, my brother calls me, and he says, "I know you're really sick, but we have a really big problem." By the way, he lives in New Jersey. The Cook County Sheriff called him, asked him if he knew a Sheri Smith, because someone filed the missing persons report because they couldn't find me for 4 days. He tried to explain that I was in the hospital with COVID, and the sheriff was like, "Uh-huh." So we were trying to figure out who reported me missing. And we pinned it down to our aunt. So the sheriff suggested to us, do you think you can call and tell your aunt what's going on? So we hang up the phone, and all of a sudden I hear this clanking walking down the hallway. And guess who's at my door of the hospital? The sheriff. You know, reality is so much better than fiction. I can't make this stuff up if I tried. So the sheriff came in, sat down, took out his notepad, started questioning me. And after about 30 minutes, he says, I think we can drop the case because you were found. Oh my God, what was my aunt thinking? So now we're gonna fast forward 5 days later. I had to stay in the hospital. I'm feeling a little better, and it's early in the morning, and the nurse comes barging in and says to me, are you ready to go home? I say to her, I have been wearing the same clothes for 5 days. I have no shoes, and I have no coat. She looks at me and says the most dreadful comment in any hospital. Ma'am, we're gonna have to call social service department to get you some assistance. I was mortified. Me of all people, I'm like Imelda Marcos. So I tried telling her about how many pairs of shoes I had at home. And she looked at me and she's like, I'm sorry, but that won't help us now. So about 6 hours of waiting, someone brings me a pair of someone's old nursing shoes. They were dirty. You could tell they were worn. So I put them on, and I'm slapping around the room like a clown. And I say to the nurse, do you think I could take a shower? So she goes in the bathroom, and she immediately comes out. She's like, nope, the shower's broken. I said, can I go to my father's room and take a shower? That's against the policy. So she says, I'm gonna have to call maintenance. I'm like, okay, how long do you think that'll take? She looks at me and says, about a week. So I say to her, you're telling me I'm going home smelling like a dirty animal, no shower, dirty clothes, and someone else's old nursing shoes. The nurse looked at me and she said, I guess so. Immediately after that, the technician comes in, brings the wheelchair. She goes, are you ready? I'm like, I have no coat. No coat. Like, this is it. A t-shirt and old pajama bottoms. And she says to me, here, put this on. And she gives me a hospital gown. Like, that's gonna help. So as I'm being wheeled out, I'm like, could I stop and say goodbye to my dad? Nope, you can't see him. It's against the policy. He has COVID. I'm like, okay. So we get to the front door, and the technician says, I will go out and get the cab. Stay here. It's a blizzard in Chicago this day. So I'm dressed in a hospital gown with someone else's shoes on. And the cab driver takes one look at me, and he's like, oh my God, did she escape from the mental health unit? So guess what? I got in the cab anyway. And I said to the driver, hi, I want to warn you. I smell like ass. I have no money. I'm wearing dirty clothes that I haven't changed in 5 days. Haven't had a shower, and obviously no coat. But I'm not homeless, I swear to you. So I said, if you drive me to this address, which is written on a piece of scrap paper, I'll go in and try to find you money. He looked at me like I was insane. But he drove me anyway. So I went up to my dad's condo, found his secret stash, of course, took $40, and I come back to the driver, and I say to him, oh, here, happy holidays. He turns around, he's like, ma'am, I don't celebrate holidays. I looked at him and I'm like, happy whatever. Could the situation get any worse? So I recovered. However, my father didn't. A few days later, the hospital called me and told me to get my family together, so I called my brother. He came on the next plane to Chicago. I picked him up and we went straight to the hospital. My dad was in such bad shape, gasping for air. COVID had pretty much eaten his lungs. You know, nurses talk about that stuff all the time. Anyway, he was in the ICU. So of course, being the nurse, or being the senior nurse now, I said, can I speak to the nurse taking care of him? Here she comes, 3/4 my age. And she says to me, oh, you can look at your father through the glass, but I couldn't go in the room. She turns around and says to me, have you ever heard of COVID? So I turned back and I said, no, what's that? So now my brother whispers to me, don't start. So in the meantime, I start putting on the blue gown, the face shield, the gloves, the whole get up. And she says to me, if you proceed into the room, we're going to call security. So I said to her, you know what, do me a favor. Can I borrow your phone? She looks at me. I'm like, I'll call security on myself. My dad's going to die. And I'm going into the room. So she watches me, and I walk in the room, and I told my father that we loved him. And I held his hand for a while. Then I came out. The entire nursing department watched me in silence as I removed my gown, gloves, and eye shield. Like, oh, she's a bad girl. So I said to the nurse, you know what, can I talk to you for a minute? So we went into the family waiting room. And I said to her, it's so funny that you ask me if I ever heard of COVID. Not because I've been a nurse longer than you've been alive. And I've been hospitalized here. You could have looked at my chart to see what I had COVID last week. So I said to her, by the way, I'm the nurse investigator for the Department of Public Health. And by the way, I'll be discussing this with your nurse manager tomorrow. So I said, sometimes in life, first of all, I said to her, you know what? I'm so proud of you. Like, you guys really adhere to all the rules and regulations. I'm like, it's like an army camp here. I said, but sometimes the rules are meant to be broken. So, as my brother and I start to leave, we hear an alarm, an announcement, code red. My brother looks at me and goes, what the hell is that? I said, well, code red usually means that there's a fire in the hospital. So we both proceeded out the door, and we look up, and we see smoke billowing out of the hospital window, and we see all the fire trucks and all the chaos going on. And then we realized we just said goodbye to our father. And now we're standing, watching the firemen put out the fire. When my brother turns around and says to me, do you think Dad will get cremated before he gets cremated? So we burst out in laughter. We must have looked like a bunch of idiots standing there laughing in the street until we start crying. Yes, we lost our father, our best friend, to this terrible virus. We realize that so many people have lost so many things this past year, and yet we're goofballs. We're standing there laughing. Laughter can be really healing. When you can laugh through difficulties life throws at you, they begin to feel less scary. Tonight, I realize that everyone faces challenges and struggles. And you probably have losses or close friends or family that have been lost because of COVID. But be there for each other and find the laughter. I would tell you to hug each other, but as a member of the Department of Public Health and the CDC, I need to tell you that masks inside, stay 6 feet apart, and please wash your hands.